brand building. You just went to Con Lions and you wrote a LinkedIn article about it being a big chance for B2B marketers to learn from top B2C marketing strategies. And you talked about B2B brand building a little bit in that. You also have on social media, you're following, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I mean, I couldn't believe the numbers that I was looking at. I mean, I could, but I couldn't at the same time. And that you have 21,000 fans on Facebook, 56,000 followers on Instagram, 20,000 followers on Twitter, 32,000 followers on LinkedIn. Every single one of those platforms is extremely challenging to get even close to a fraction of that, let alone have that consistency. So could you talk a little bit about building brand from a B2B perspective? And then also from a social perspective, where you can marry those two things together, however you think about it. But I think a lot of people are going to struggle with building their B2B brand because of, like you mentioned, B2B is so far behind B2C and being able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think B2B marketers are traditionally the worst at building brands. And it's because B2B, typically it's when you're selling to businesses, you're typically selling a higher value product. It's very logical, rational. You're solving a very specific problem. Which means that kind of because it's so sales driven and because sales focuses time on those pain points with prospects, marketing just seems to always be quite clinical and boring and corporate. So the reason why I went to Cannes was because, I think the B2C world do a much better job when it comes to CPG, right? Consumer packaged goods and fast moving products. It's far less logical and rational, and it's far more emotional and gut and instinctual. And so their content and campaigns are always very visceral. They're very much about kind of making you feel a certain way. They're about surprising you, delighting you, making you laugh, making you cry. And I don't necessarily think that, B2B should, go completely down that path. But I think as a CMO, it would be silly of me it would be dumb of me. Here we go, I'll pay myself out to make up for my last comment. It would be dumb of me not to go to that event at least once because, there's stuff that I can learn from that industry. And I think that's kind of actually, funnily, now that we talk about it, like a very good proof of what I said before is that like I am obsessed with learning from other people and other industries, selfishly because I want to steal all of their great ideas and apply them to my world and integrate them better than anyone else. And I think I genuinely do a pretty good job at like understanding many aspects of marketing more than I think other CMOs that have just kind of stayed in one lane. And it's because I just pushed myself out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But so I don't think B2B CMOs do a very good job at that. And I don't think, we have done a very good job at that at G2. And so, I want to kind of upskill myself so that I can help upskill my team, et cetera. But I think, if you look at software today, right, there is something like 60,000 pieces of B2B software out there. There's something like 250, maybe 1,000 different email marketing platforms. And so in the B2B space, B2B used to be a differentiator. So B2B software, SaaS, used to be, I think, a thing that could differentiate you in terms of winning or losing. If you were a company that got in on SaaS and software early, that gave you an unfair advantage. And I think today, everyone uses software. Everyone uses 50 different pieces of just email marketing software alone. The software is less the differentiator today, and it's how you use the software. And so once you kind of move into a parity market where you're selling products that are similar to everyone else's, and not all software categories are like this. CRM certainly is, email marketing certainly is, social media is kind of like that. These kind of categories where there's tons of different options, they're all kind of similar. People, when they're making the decision, they're going to lean more into some of the emotive components because if your products are all the same, who wouldn't want to work with the brand that's a bit more fun and is a bit more enjoyable and they like more. And so that's kind of my thoughts on B2B branding. And that's why we at G2 went through a rebrand earlier this year where we dropped the crowd from our name. So we're just G2 now. We completely redid our logo, our brand colors, but it was more than just a visual refresh. It was more actually that we as a company like changed our mission and our focus and shifted because we understood our buyers a little bit more. So that's kind of what I would say on the B2B branding side of the house. On the B2C, on the personal brand and building your own brand on social, I think, I talked about this at Drift's conference last year. I keynoted there and spoke about kind of how to build your career and your brand. And I think sometimes people feel embarrassed to like toot their own horn, and it doesn't need to be like that. But I think the way I've always viewed it is that, the bigger my clout as a person, as a marketer, the more interesting I am to people so that they follow me, that they want to interview me, that they talk to me, they allow me to talk at events, the more valuable I am to an employer, because I
100%.
already have a
100%.
platform to talk to people, right? So, if you think of me in my current role, right, like when I go into my next role at my next company, which no idea when that will happen because I love G2, I publish content for, HBR, for the World Economic Forum, fuck, there's so many publications now.
Entrepreneur.com,
Entrepreneur, like I have all of these like
Business
connections
Insider.
there because they trust me and they know that like I'm not writing salesy content. Like I'm exposing, my flaws and talking about wins, and I'm giving their writers something of value. And so when I go to my next company, now immediately I have this Rolodex of companies that I can, write for. And now, in all the bios, it's going to say Ryan is the CMO, CEO, et cetera, of this new company. And I'll naturally, I'm a marketer, so I'll naturally like pull in a very natural, lovely way, like a mention of that company that's super authentic to what I'm writing about, obviously. And yeah, it's a win-win. And so I think my lesson on for folks listening that are like, yeah, okay, well, it's easy to kind of like get press when you're a CMO, and write for these companies. Like when I wasn't a CMO, I still was doing it. You just have to start smaller. And so the step-by-step process that I told people to do is, you probably already work for a company. So, tap on your content marketing team's door and say, hey guys, hey gals, I would love to create some content for our company blog. And no content marketer is going to say no to that because they have really big traffic goals and they want more content. And so then, hey, like what topics do you guys need content around? And let's see if I can find a crossover of where I have a skill set and where you need content. And then, work with them, publish some content, publish more content. That helps get you on the map. And then you then might get noticed by someone and someone might ask you to write for them. But now at least you can proactively reach out to tier 3 publications and say, hey, I write for insert company publication and here are a few links to some of my work. I just recently wrote this piece of content about topic X, which I think would be a really good fit for your audience. I've pasted it in the email below. Let me know what you think and if you publish it. That just kind of gets you up and running, And so if that person doesn't reply, try another tier 3 publication. And that's genuinely how I did it. And then I went from tier 3 to tier 2. And then when I started creating content for tier 1, I referenced my tier 2 work. And, you just kind of slowly work your way up. And then after a while, you don't need to reference it anymore because people will just Google your name and they'll see all of the content, and that's the proof kind of thing. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. You've been doing this for so long, personally and professionally.
Well, the only thing I would add as well, Brandon, is that like I think for the biggest asterisk on all this before, and it's kind of like, I mentioned with content marketing, if you don't have the right keyword and topic idea from the get-go, you will fail. With building your personal brand and writing content, if you aren't like authentic and if you don't have something unique to say, that's key. No one's going to publish your bullshit. Like, if I wrote a blog, that blog post that I wrote for Harvard Business Review about like why I tell my best employees to seek other job offers, if I wrote like why I love to run one-on-one meetings, like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Of course, like, we all know that's important. Like, oh, Ryan has a different view on, career progression and letting people leave. That is interesting. So that's where you need to be a marketer, and you need to think about storytelling. You need to think about your unique skill set and how you can, tell a story that people will want to read. Because I think if you don't have that from the beginning, that no one will ever reply to you, and this won't work for you.